Let's face it, a lot of commercially available non-alcoholic beer sucks. It's either got that burnt, acrid taste from a vacuum heated distillation to remove the alcohol, or they've got this oniony, garlicky thing due to leftover aldehydes in an unfinished, unfermented beer. Have you ever asked yourself, can I do better? Can I make a good non-alcoholic beer at home that's actually worth drinking? Well, if you're asking that question, you've come to the right place. Stay tuned. In this grain into glass video, I'm going to show you how to make excellent non-alcoholic beer at home. Let's begin by talking about our planning and recipe design for this beer. Now, I've chosen the style American Pale Ale, but obviously it's not going to be as full, malty, or have as much alcohol as American Pale Ale by design. We're only going to reach 0.3% gravity, and our original gravity 1012 with a finishing gravity of 1010. So we are hoping to retain some of the body of a smaller American Pale Ale with some colour and enough bitterness to give us that impression of the style. Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to start with our Brewfather G30, which I actually like as a brewing system for small, lower alcohol beers. It tends to be quite small if you want to do bigger, higher alcohol styles that require a larger grist, but for a low alcohol beer, you can do a no sparge full volume batch in one of these and still end up with your 23 litres of wort at the end. So it actually works very well for non-alcoholic beers. So our malt bill, our grist, is going to start with 500 grams of Dexter malt, which is going to give us a lot more dextrins in the beer to give us mouthfeel and also a slight maltiness. Munich malt will give us a bit more of a malty, toasty complexity to the beer, add a little bit of colour and just give it that little bit of something extra. Aurora malt is a melanoidin malt which adds a bit more colour and malt complexity to the beer. Voodoo, again, we're layering in more complexity, is a cross between a Munich and a crystal malt. And 100 grams of Gladfield medium crystal malt. I'd normally add a bit more than this, but that's all I had on hand at the time. So let's talk about our hop bill now. We're going to use 5 grams of Citra as a bittering addition. And then at 20 minutes, 30 grams of Amarillo, at 10 minutes, 30 grams of Amarillo, and 50 grams of Galaxy in the dry hop. So I've selected 3 hop varieties to give some complexity to our style. Now there's a reason why I've chosen to put Citra early on in the boil, Amarillo later, and Galaxy in the fermenter. If we look at this chart which talks about hop survivables, it's looking at which compounds hang around in the beer, in the boil. Of the hops I'm using, Citra retains the most hop compounds that will provide us with flavour and aroma. All the names of these compounds are here, but for now, just looking at this bar graph, we can see that Citra retains a fair bit of these oils. Not as many as Centennial, but more than Cascade. And then the other hop I'm using, Amarillo, has less of these oils hanging around. So I'm going to use that later in my boil so that I can retain more of those properties rather than boiling them off during the boil. And last in my dry hop, it's not on that chart, but Galaxy. I want to use that very late in my dry hop so that I can retain those thiols, those passion fruity flavors. which will boil off pretty easily. So the best way to retain them is to use them as a dry hop. These are my salt additions that I'm going to add to these beers. Don't copy them because your brewing water will vary and you'll need to work out what's appropriate for your own water you're using at home. I also use Brewtan B in these beers as a way of trying to preserve the beer longer, to stop it oxidizing. Brewtan B is a tannic acid compound which binds to those heavy metals and drops them out of solution. Those heavy metals would later on otherwise help oxidize your beer. So to avoid that process or minimize the oxidation of the beer, retain our flavors for longer, I add this compound Brewtan B. When producing standard and higher alcohol strength beers, we often get something called biotransformation, in which hop compounds are modified by the yeast activity and enzymes that yeast produce to give us more fruity, flavorful compounds in our finished beer. Now, because we've got very little yeast activity in these non-alcoholic beers, we don't get much of this biotransformation. And so to compensate for that lack of fermentation, I'm adding in something called aromazyme. By adding this compound, this aromazyme, we're adding this beta-glucosidase, which is a common enzyme secreted by your yeast during fermentation. And what this beta-glucosidase does is it liberates these aroma compounds from your hops, which would otherwise remain bound to the vegetal matter and end up on the bottom of your fermenter. Now let's also talk about the mashing regime here. I want to mash at 80 degrees Celsius, which is much higher than the conventional mash temperature, which usually fits somewhere between 60 and 70 degrees Celsius. The reason we generally mash within these parameters is to take advantage of the enzymes which are involved in the brewing process. They're proteases which break down proteins to give us good head retention and clearer beer. There are other enzymes which will break dextrins into fermentable sugars. The reason that most brewers using a single step infusion mash will rest on 65 degrees Celsius is because that's the Goldilocks zone where we seem to be able to take advantage of all those enzymes at one convenient mash temperature. We're going to try Pomona from Lallemand as our yeast in this brew and see if it gives us any fruitiness to this beer. It does in higher alcohol brews, but again, due to the limited fermentation in non-alcoholic beers, we can't expect so much of that biotransformation and yeast expression in the finished product. For our fermentation, I'm starting at 22 degrees Celsius, which is reasonably warm for this beer, but again, I want to give it every chance to express any esters or fruity character that it can. After 3 days, we're then ramping up slowly to 28 degrees so that we can give the yeast plenty of time to finish out and complete fermentation. All right then, let's brew some beer. To ensure the food safety of your beer so that no one gets sick, it's important to take pH very seriously. Here I'm taking a pH reading of 5.12 of my unfermented wort before it goes into the fermenter. That's way too high, so I'm going to pre-acidify my wort to hopefully get it somewhere in the mid to high 4s. That way I'm hoping that when I add my yeast, there'll be a small drop in pH that will bring it down to my food safe level of about 4.2. In standard strength beers, the yeast will usually do this for us, so we don't have to think or worry too much about this process. But again, because of the limited fermentation in non-alcoholic brews, we usually need to add lactic acid somewhere in the process to make sure our beer is food safe. Hey brewers, we're back with the finished product, and here she is. Look at that. Beautiful head retention, and a lovely amber copper color with pretty good clarity as well. That's really cool for a non-alcoholic beer. Because we mashed at that higher 80-degree temperature, the protease enzymes, which normally break down those haze proteins, usually become inactivated early on in the process. And what that means is you end up with a hazier beer. Great if you want to make a hazy pale ale, but if you want to make an American style, not so great because you want it clear. All right, let's have a look. Let's talk about the fragrance, the aroma. Okay, so we get a strong floral fragrance with some tropical and citrus notes, and then it's supported by these toasty, malty notes. Let's jump in and try the flavor. Cheers. So there is a slight malt sweetness to it and a toasty malt backbone, which I'm quite happy with. Certainly those specialty malts have helped to add and complement the malt presence. Also, when we think about the hops, there's this strong floral note. The geraniol is prominent, which is what we might expect because on that beta-glucanase product that we added, the aromazyme, that was one of the compounds that the marketing said it would liberate from your hops, and it certainly has in this case. There's a strong floral presence and then citrus notes and maybe a hint of that tropical passion fruit character coming through on the back end. All that's supported by a firm bitterness which lingers into the aftertaste along with those tropical and citrus notes. The body's pretty good, so that dexter malt has done its job and firmed and thickened up the beer to give it a bit more body and bite. Overall, I'm really quite happy with this and I'd recommend it. Let us know down below if you end up making this beer. Let us know how it went. Let us know if there's any improvements or tweaks that you might add. Let us know if you've had experience trying to brew non-alcoholic beers. What are your tips? Perhaps there's other things I should have mentioned in this video. Add it to the comments below so that everyone else can learn. And also, as always, if you've enjoyed this video and got this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us at our pub's homebrew meeting. At pubs, we meet on the third Tuesday of every month. So if you're in our local area, we hope to see you there. And if not, why not look into what clubs are operating in your local area? Until next time, keep brewing.